Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We are going to make cruffins today. For those of you that don't know, cruffins are kind of like a hybrid between croissants and muffins. Basically croissant dough cut apart so you can see all of the different layers, and then tied in a knot and baked inside of a muffin pan. They're supposed to be flaky and delicious and buttery and tender and wonderful, and they look amazing, super impressive when you see them. And this recipe was something that I found on Pinterest. It was a blog post that was written by a gal who said she hated folding, she didn't like laminated dough at all, and she wanted to find another way to make these cruffins with ease without having to chill or take a ton of time to do it. So she used a pasta machine. And I thought to myself, well, I have a pasta machine and I like cruffins, so maybe I would like this. You're gonna have to watch the rest of the video to figure out what I thought about it. But let's just say I probably won't be using this method again in the future. Anyway, here we go. First step is to measure out 165 grams of butter. I had this French style butter, but I only had about 150 grams of that, so I had to use some of this not so great butter as well. And you want to do this 2 hours before you get started on the actual dough. Let it sit at room temperature so it completely softens. Next, we're going to mix our dough. We got 130 grams of lukewarm water, 6 grams of instant dry yeast. I had instant dry yeast, so you don't have to let it bloom. You can just mix it together and put it in the dough, no worries there. 150 grams of bread flour, 150 grams of AP flour, 11 grams of salt, and you start mixing that together. Use your dough hook, and you're going to let it come together as best as it can. It's going to look dry on the sides, so please do scrape it down with a spatula. And you can add up to 2 tablespoons of water to this dough just until it starts to come together. In the meantime, you're going to want to cut up 50 grams of unsalted butter and let that soften a little bit before we're going to add it to the dough. Once the dough has come together a little bit more, you're going to start adding your butter chunk by chunk, slowly. And I even like to use my fingers to kind of soften the butter a little bit more before it goes into the dough. Once it's all added in, you're going to let it mix for about 10 minutes until it's smooth and supple, and then you're gonna turn it out onto your table, or in this case my countertop, and you're gonna form it into a ball and let it rest in the bowl for 40 minutes covered. Next step is dividing it into 4 equal portions. We're gonna now actually do the forming of the dough, the layering, the lamination with the pasta machine. So haul out that pasta machine, strap it to the countertop, and get ready to roll. I have some flour ready for dusting, and then I have my 4 chunks of dough that I'm going to be rolling out individually. First thing that I wanted to do was take one of the pieces of dough, dust it with flour liberally on the outside, and kind of form it into a rectangle, because ultimately that's the shape that we're going to be getting while we run the dough through the pasta machine. You're going to start at the thickest setting, which for my pasta machine is 7, and with the dough fully floured, you're going to roll it on through, making sure not to let it fold or crinkle or get snagged on anything. Then make sure that the dough is still nice and slippery with its flour. Adjust the pasta machine to be the next thinnest setting and roll it on through again. You're going to continue this process until you get to the 2 setting, which is not the absolute thinnest that you could do, but it's the second thinnest. Once you've got it all rolled out, I had a really long piece, so I cut it in half, and using that room temperature softened butter, I spread it all the way to the edges with my fingers. That's the way that the person who wrote the blog post suggested to do it, and it was kind of frustrating because the dough would just pick up off of the countertop and get stuck to my fingers. And then I had to wash my hands in between everything. And you know, it's great to wash your hands, but it's super frustrating to be in the middle of a project and have flour on your hands and then butter on your hands, and then you gotta go wash your hands and you gotta step away and step over the infant, and it's just a mess. What I did find was way more helpful was using a baby offset spatula. Super easy to smooth the butter, so please, please, please do it that way. Do not use your fingers. Anyway, once you have spread it across the entire dough all the way out to the edges, you're going to start at one end of one piece of the dough and start rolling it very tightly. Once you get to the end of that piece of dough, you just pick up that little roll and you put it on the edge of the other piece of dough and continue to roll until you've rolled the entire thing up. Repeat this all 4 times with each of the chunks of dough, and you've got 4 rolled up tubes of dough. Next step is we're going to cut it apart, form it, and put it in the muffin tin. So grab your muffin tins. You don't need to grease them. There's so much butter in this dough and in this recipe that it's pretty much going to grease itself, and it doesn't stick to the pan, so I haven't had any issues with that. What you'll want to do now is take your sharpest knife and dust it with flour. You'll cut the pieces of dough lengthwise in half. And then with the cut sides down, you're going to cut them in half again. So you basically get 4 quarters for every chunk of dough. So that's 16 total muffins. Using those little pieces, you're going to tie them into a knot and then put them in the muffin tin. Once you're finished, we're going to let this rest at room temperature for an hour and a half to 2 hours until they've doubled in size. After it's risen for an hour and a half to 2 hours, once it looks like it's really nice and proofed, you're going to take the towel off the top of it and preheat your oven to 400 degrees. Here's a close-up at the cruffins. You can see all of the different layers and they're tied up in these knots. I started to get excited at this point, but the layers did look pretty thick to me. When I was rolling the dough with the pasta machine, it seemed almost impossible to go a little bit thinner with the dough because already it was kind of unmanageable. I don't know about you guys, but my pasta machine rolls thinner on one side than it does on the other. And is there a way to like calibrate a pasta machine so that it's more functional? I don't know. Anyway, it was really, really frustrating. So I didn't want to roll it any thinner. And it was very easy to tear at that point, so I was afraid that I was going to just tear the dough. I bet I could go thinner with the pasta machine, but to be honest, the whole process of rolling all of the dough out with the pasta machine was so frustrating that I'd rather just laminate dough the normal way. Yeah, it takes more time, but you get a better product. Anyway, you're going to put your muffins in the oven at 400 degrees, and you're going to bake them for about 25 minutes until they're golden brown. Take them on out, put them on a cooling rack, and dust liberally with powdered sugar. My family loved these. The powdered sugar on top is really the only bit of sweetness that's in this recipe. So when you eat them, it's this flaky, crispy, shattery, layered texture, but the flavor itself is very savory. I think that these would be awesome without the powdered sugar and with maybe like a chicken soup or a stew or something like that. They are really delicious. They're not really cruffins. So that's that. I'm going to be testing out some other cruffin recipes and kind of comparing them so I can tell you which one is easier, which one takes more time, which one yields the better product. So stay tuned. If you did like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe, leave some comments down below on what you thought, and maybe even some requests for what you'd like to see next. Let me know if you try this recipe and if it works better for you. I really, really hope it does because I didn't really enjoy making this recipe, although the results were pretty tasty, just not what I expected. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys another time. Be well.